Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice Radio. So today, we're going to be looking at a new Vileplume card. Now, this is, of course, very interesting, because it was only a few days ago that I showed you how the Vileplume from Burning Shadows, which was hitherto assumed to be a little bit rubbish, was in fact a really good, relevant card that can shut down basics. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in Unbroken Bonds, which is going to be out in May, we are getting another Vileplume. And this one's kind of cool, but we can't actually talk about this one on its own. We've got to have a little bit of a chat about Gloom as well. So if we start off with the basics of Vileplume then, it's got 140 HP, which honestly is quite low for a stage 2. We would usually expect kind of 160 like Empoleon has. The retreat cost of 3 is low, but not quite low enough to use buff padding. And the weakness to fire is not ideal because Blacephalon is quite big at the moment. And the new Blacephalon also looks really good. So, we're really not loving the basics here. Now, being a grass type really doesn't give you that many great weaknesses to be hitting, honestly. I mean, you're hitting weakness on Lycanroc, which is quite nice. But I'm going to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, the basics as a whole here do not fill us with a huge amount of confidence. You do, of course, have things like Life Forest Prism Star and Shaman from Lost Thunder. So if you want to be doing a bit of healing, you absolutely can. But remember, you've got quite a low HP comparatively, and you're a stage 2, so we're not loving it. But the ability here, according to the lovely David Hochmann over at limitlesstcg.com/translations, Variety Pollen. Once during your turn, you may flip a coin. If heads, choose either Poison, Burn, Sleep, or Confusion. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now affected by the chosen condition. So you can have Poison, Burn, Sleep, or Confusion. You cannot have Paralysis. Paralysis would mean they cannot attack next turn. Paralysis, I mean, look, if you could choose Paralysis, then nobody would choose Sleep or Confusion. You've essentially got 2, hey, let's do a bit of damage special conditions. And we've got 2, you can't attack special conditions. So we have a look at the you can't attack special conditions. Sleep says that your opponent has to flip a coin at the beginning of their turn, and if heads they wake up, if tails they stay asleep, cannot attack, retreat, etc. Now, the thing about Sleep is it gives your opponent the information at the beginning of their turn. Sleep says you cannot attack this turn, so you'd better find something like a Switch or a Guzma. Whereas something like Confusion, they flip a coin when they try and attack, and if heads it works, if tails they take 30 damage, and the attack fails. Now the thing is, Sleep, you're giving your opponent the information right at the beginning of the turn, you can't attack, get out. Confusion gives them hope, but Confusion might do a little bit of damage. The reality is most people aren't going to attack with a confused Pokemon anyway, because the risk is too great and they might take the damage. So there are some situations where you're going to want to put them to sleep, and some where you're going to want to confuse them, and it depends on, do you want the extra damage, do you want to give them a chance to get out the active, do you think they can get out the active, etc, etc, etc. If we have a look at the damage dealing special conditions here, we've got Poison and we've got Burn. Now Poison does 1 damage counter between turns, whereas Burn does 2. But Burn, you flip a coin after taking the damage, and if heads, you're no longer burned. So Burn does strictly more damage, whereas Poison stays around longer. And then again, you could play something like Seviper to do extra damage, 10, with Poison, whereas you could play Infernape to do an extra 60 damage with Burn. And then you could play something like, well, a Volcano Park, so that if they flip a heads for Burn, they are still burned. But then again, you could play something like the recently revealed Dust Island, link in the description, so that if they try and use a trainer card to switch their poison Pokemon, the new one is now poisoned. And essentially, this just gives you the choice. This lets you do whichever one of these you want to do. And I like that. You're not always going to want to do the same one of all of these. So this basically goes, look, whichever one of it you actually want to do, fine, go for it. It adds a little bit of extra choice and it adds a little bit of extra strategy, and I for one really like this. As for the attack, well, it's not amazing. We're really here for the ability. But the attack says, for a grass, colourless, 90 damage, heal 30. It's too expensive. It's just plain too expensive. Now look, 90 damage is in and of itself fine. You will need a Shrine of Punishment to take down a Lapras, but that's alright. You can. And if you had a choice band here, you're up to 240. And to be fair, we do have a 250 HP Pokemon that is weak to grass. It's Primarina, incidentally. But then again, you can just use Shrine of Punishment. So if you've got Shrine of Punishment and Choice Band, you're essentially doing 250 in one hit. No one's playing Primarina, but if they were, it would go down. Magikarp and Wailord, however, would unfortunately survive. But you're also healing 30. The 120 damage is not great. We're not huge fans. We're not loving it here. But then again, you're healing 30. It'd be lovely if you could use buff padding to get an extra 50 HP, but you can't, so please stop crying about it. It's fine, but it's largely going to be irrelevant most of the time. Healing 30 is not enough. Now, if you start combining healing 30 with the attack, and then you pop 4 Shaman on your bench, so now you're healing 110 every turn, well now, ladies and gentlemen, that's looking pretty good. It means that Pokemon like Boswell, for instance, which might be trying to sit there and spread a bit of damage around, really just are not doing very much at all. The problem is, it's for a grass colourless. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. If it was for a grass double colourless, 2 attachments, yay, we're alright. No! It just seems so expensive. And we don't have great ways to accelerate at the moment grass energy. It's just, I see it as almost unusable. Now, you might be thinking, well, hang on a second, Wassy. Haven't you just got done telling us about the other Vileplume, which is really good and got 3rd place at a 1,200-person tournament and has the same attack cost? Well, yeah, the difference is that stops your opponent attacking. And that makes a huge difference. Because if your opponent can't attack, then that means that you don't need to do much damage. You need to do, like, some damage. And as long as you're doing some damage, you're going to be okay. And I really do think that is the big difference here. You're doing an alright amount of damage, but the attack cost is almost unpayably high. Now, as for Gloom here, we're really just going to focus on the ability, because there's nothing else that's good about it. I certainly don't like drooling grass colourless 30 damage. Once during your turn, you may flip a coin. If heads, look at your opponent's hand and put a basic Pokemon you find there onto their bench. Now, Gloom's the kind of Pokemon that should be getting their own video and may well be in the future, but I wanted to mention it here because it's a really nice ability. You can bench something like Dedenne and then not use the ability, because you get the choice of whether you use it or not. You can clog up their bench. If we look at something like Crabominable that we looked at the other day, Crabominable does an extra 50 damage for each Pokemon fewer than your opponent that you have in play. Oh look, that's essentially an extra 50 damage. It is on a coin flip, but it is also every turn. So if you've got 2 or 3 Gloom down, you could potentially use this every turn. I mean, Captivating Pokepuff is basically back. Of course, if you've got Gloom on your bench, you are really telegraphing to your opponent, hey, I can bench all your basic Pokemon for you. So that means that your opponent is going to be playing their bench Pokemon down slightly faster than they might otherwise be. They're not going to keep their basic Pokemon in hand for the perfect opportunity where they might have before. They're going to be a little bit cagier, so to speak. I like Gloom as an ability, and I think it's a handy bonus, and honestly, I think I might like Gloom more than I like Vileplume. No, actually, let's change that around. I like Gloom more than I like Vileplume. We certainly don't have time today to be getting into all of the little tiny silly little things you can do with Gloom. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. I will be bringing you a video about Gloom in the not too distant future, but I had to mention it with Vileplume here because it's actually a really fancy, nice ability. The most common uses for this are going to be benching something like a Tapu Lele without giving them the ability, and just filling up their bench so they cannot bench what they want to. I'm going to be giving these Pokemon free Wassies. I like the ability on both of them, but Gloom being a stage 1 and being potentially a bit more useful does give that one the edge for me. But I would very much like to know what you think about these cards, so please do let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! But please do remember the rule, ladies and gentlemen. Be nice, would you? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays for some more Wassy action. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.